going on, Winnipeg fans all across the U.S. and Canada? This is the Winnipeg Terminal. I'm your host, Mike D'Andrea. This is Joe Pritchard. Joe, how we doing today?
Oh, great. We're experiencing third winter right now.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's kind of funny because it's only for a day too. Like, yesterday I was outside in short sleeves and talking about the weather and how great it was, and then 12 hours later I go back outside and I needed my winter coat, I needed my toque, I needed everything because it was cold.
Yeah, we were outside when the front hit. It dropped degrees
Mm,
every minute as we were like,
yeah.
oh, well then, I guess that's the end of summer for now.
It's funny because yesterday, I mentioned it this morning where, like, yesterday was 62 degrees in Eau Claire, and or was it 61? Yeah, 62 because 61 was the old record. Anyways, sorry, side note there. Um, I was like, tomorrow is going to feel cold, but like this is what we've come to expect in February, and that's exactly what it was. It felt so cold today, but this is a normal February day in Wisconsin. So I think that just goes to show how spoiled we were.
Yeah, and like this whole thing has been nutty everywhere. I've seen people in Ontario saying they're having the same pattern too. So a
Hmm.
couple other places are just like up and down, up and down. So something weird's happening.
Yeah, my boys in I know that we both got boys in Winnipeg, but they were saying how it was like a crazy snow that they got. They ended up getting, according to my chat here, 3 to 6 inches up that way. But I mean, for how warm it's been there too, it's just kind of weird to think about how we get a day of winter and then look ahead at the forecast for tomorrow. Just
Uh
blows
huh.
my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going.
So,
It's just like that.
mhm. It's as my boss had called it, weather whiplash, and I
There you
couldn't
go. I like
find
that.
a better term for it. But we were talking about being spoiled as far as the weather is concerned, but I think that we're starting to get a little spoiled with the boys too, with some of the recent games, of the results of the games, I should say, they've been playing, because it hasn't necessarily been some dominant wins, but they were still W's at the end of the day. And this kind of brings up the point. I've seen this in the Facebook groups for the Jets fan pages and everything, and they're like, oh, this is just an ugly win against a bottom feeder team like Chicago, or an ugly win against a team like Arizona in overtime or whatever. And I think to myself, sure, they can't all be Picasso's. Same thing that Arneal and Bonus will tell you. But the W's at the end of the day are what matter. And just like, we'll just look ahead to the postseason. And if you have an ugly series that you win 4 games to two, right? But all 4 of those wins were ugly. Maybe you won on a garbage goal or something. You still won the series. You're still moving on. The other team, they may have been the better team, but they didn't show up when it mattered, and they go home. So that's kind of the way that I look at it, especially when you're coming out of a pretty bad slump that they were in a couple weeks ago. Wins are wins at that point, and there's still some issues that need to be addressed, but it is nice to see them get back in the W column, even if they still haven't completely worked through the issues. Now, 5-on-5 has become a little bit of an issue, but they've fixed the power play, so they're at least playing to the weaknesses that they had.
Yeah, they swung a little bit in a different direction, but like you were saying, winning when you're not playing your A game is probably honestly more important than winning when you're playing your A game, because you're only going to get a certain amount of those games where everything's clicking. Finding ways to win, even against inferior competitions, even when you're not playing up to what you know you can do, that's what's going to shoot you up the standings and get you a better playoff seating.
And the game against St. Louis, I feel like out of this series or recent stretch of games, I think that game against St. Louis was probably one of their better ones. St. Louis kind of came back with a little bit of a counterattack, but for the most part, it seemed like the Jets were able to hold their own for most of the game. And I mean, that's the 3 games that they just had. Those are teams that you do need to beat, but it also helps that they are Central Division foes too, even if they are bottom.
Right, because division games are going to be just that little bit more intense than playing somebody in the Pacific or the Metropolitan or the Atlantic. Just there's just a little bit more tension right off the hop, and the Jets have also done a really good job in the first period getting out 2 leads, so that they've been finding that lately they've been playing back on their heels after they get those leads, which is something they need to change. But one problem at a time. Let's get the lead first.
Right. And, I want to aptly the first star of the game against St. Louis. We'll kind of dissect that game here first. Uh, First star of the game was Laurent Brossois. And I mean, very well deserved. 36 saves, let up 2 goals or whatever, gives them a 947 save percentage. And a lot of those saves were like, you want to ring 10 bells on him too. I mean, he played an incredible game. There's a lot of words I want to say, but I mean, he played a really great game, nothing short of stellar. But another another guy that you want to see on the score sheet, who second star of the game, Josh Morrissey, 2 assists, 2 points. So it's nice to see the D getting in on the action, especially Brendan Dillon got a goal, number 3 star of the game too. So that was nice to see. It's one of the things that I think that they kind of strayed away from for a little bit, getting the D involved. I think they were really trying to figure out their scoring or figuring out their defense for a while, and that was when they were winning those 1-0 games or 2-1, and then they started getting their D involved a little bit more. Sure, maybe you're giving up a few more goals, and you gave up the streak a little while ago of Hellebuck giving up 3 goals or less, but it is nice to see the D men on the score sheet now, and I mean the results are speaking for themselves at this point. Their scoring's not as hard to come by anymore.
No, it's almost like losing the streak after 30 plus games gave them the freedom to start playing more offensively, knowing that they didn't have a streak to cover. I'm going way back with this one, but I remember, gosh, was it 1990 or something like that, where Ryan Sandberg at second base for the Cubs had just this long errorless streak, but you could tell that he was struggling with all parts of his game because he was so focused on not making an error, he wasn't playing his game anymore. As soon as he makes an error, he goes on a hot streak and starts
Mm-hmm.
playing the way he was supposed to play, and gosh, he was MVP one of those years, I want to say. So it having that the weight of expectations come off of you sometimes is going to make it so much easier to just go back to playing the way that you're used to playing.
Oh yeah, it's just getting the monkey off your back, so to speak. So yeah, they've definitely turned things on offensively since giving up that streak, and it is kind of nice to see. And it's showing up on their shots on goal too. They're taking more shots. 32 shots to St. Louis's 38. Okay, sure. Something that was a little bit of an issue in that game, and that it was very apparent when St. Louis was kind of coming back with their they were battling back, but face-offs was just not it. 37% at face-off circle for Winnipeg. Uh, Neither team scored on the power play. We had 2 chances, but physically, I mean, we outplayed them big time. 25 to 15 hits and 17 blocked shots. So I think that's a pretty solid game. Sure, faceoffs could use a little bit of work, but that's kind of been a trend all year. Not to excuse it by any means, but it's just that's not necessarily an anomaly.
No, and you were mentioning earlier that the 5-on-5 game has slipped a bit, and it seemed like they spent a lot of time pinned back in their own zone. But when they're getting out of it, when they're finding ways to make awesome transitions and getting them set up for meaningful scoring chances a lot more often than they had been too.
Mm-hmm.
So again, you're trading one problem for one strength, and you're never going to be able to play a perfect hockey game. That just doesn't exist. Uh, but being able to make those chances meaningful and put away a lot of those chances gives you a little bit of breathing room to make a mistake defensively once in a while.
Mm-hmm. And now breaking down that game in Arizona, one of the things too that like a lot of people are saying that well the Jets are just beating or they just barely beat a team that's really struggling, but this could be one of those trap games because that was Arizona's 12th straight loss that Winnipeg was able to hand them. So naturally, if you're coming into a game with an 11-game losing streak, you're gonna fight to end that. That's one streak you really want to end, of course. But it seems like the more losses you pile up, the more you're gonna fight to end that streak. So sure, on paper it's nice because this team is struggling. It'll be an easy game, but that's the definition of a trap game. And kind of fell into that trap after, getting up early 3-1 in the first period. But then, Arizona comes back and had to force the game to overtime. And well, yeah, Kyle Connor in overtime. It's just like he's money in overtime. But
It wasn't a bad strategy they were employing earlier last week too, where they just decided, "Hey, let's get to overtime and let Kyle Connor win it in the first minute." I mean,
yeah,
it worked out very well
no, it
a
sure
couple of
did.
times. I do
Yeah.
wonder with that Arizona game if there was more going on than you could see, because Monahan missed that game due to an illness. I wonder if there was more of that going around on the team because it just looked like in the second and third periods the team didn't have any energy. Which,
That's a good
I mean,
point.
could just be the trap game going into play there, like, "Oh, we're winning, we're gonna put it on cruise control," and it could just never get out of it. But if there was more illnesses going around than what is mentioned publicly, I could understand why they'd be dragging a bit.
And that does make sense too. And it's nice to see they're still coming out with W's out of that. But that is a very good point that maybe there was something else that was behind closed doors that we don't know. That one first star. I mean, this one kind of obvious. Mark Scheifele had a goal and 3 assists for 4 points. Gabriel Velarde, second star with 1 goal and 1 assist. So that was third goal of the game. But uh, I mean, I like to you like to see your top goals or your top point getter in the score sheet. 4 points again for Scheifele. So now the big guns are waking up a little bit too, and I think that they're getting that kind of jolt that they need, especially when you have this upcoming road trip. Big game against Dallas coming up tomorrow. So all right. And looking ahead now at the upcoming road trip, let me pull up my notes here for the Dallas game. So, last 5 games, players that you want to watch: Kyle Connor, 5 goals in the last 5 games. Literally just said, it's nice to see the big guns wake up. And of course, Kyle Connor is that guy. Kind of helps with his overtime record. Um, Jason Robertson, if you want to watch the last 5 games, 1 goal. So for points, or excuse me, for assists, Josh Morrissey, 11 assists in the last 5 games, which again, solid. Miro Heiskanen has 3 points in the last 5 games. So scoring has been a real struggle for Dallas. Heiskanen also 4 points in the last 5 games, and Morrissey with 11 points. Probable starters will have Hellebuck and Ottinger. Hellebuck's record thus far 28, 11, and 3, compared to 21, 11, and 4. Goals against for Hellebuck 221, save percentage 925, and 3 shutouts. Ottinger 298 goals against, 901 save percentage, so slipping a little bit, and 1 shutout. And Brossois, of course, coming off a great game, but he's not the probable starter. Last 10 games, Winnipeg 7-3-0. So I think it's safe to say that we're coming out of that streak. For Dallas, their last 10 games, 4-3-3. They're riding a 1-game lose streak. Meanwhile, Winnipeg's on a 4-game win streak. And as far as their last meeting was in Winnipeg. Dallas won 2-0, shut out the boys. Prior to that, Veterans Day matchup, Dallas won 3-2. So they have the season series 2-0. But those 2 games were in Winnipeg, and these 2 games are in Dallas. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's nice to see them struggling to score goals because division rival, of course.
Mm-hmm.
If the Jets can get off to the kind of start they've been getting off to lately, where they put up 2 or 3 in the first period, and they're facing a team that's struggling to score, that could put them in a great position. Make Dallas have to really open up for offense, and that'll give the Jets more of a chance to finish it off early, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the big part of this, I think I agree with that, is going to have to be get out to that lead, because it seems like if Dallas jumps out to that, they could keep a lead better than Winnipeg can. I hate to say that, but sometimes you got to call a spade a spade. But once, especially with a team that's struggling to score, when they find themselves in a hole like that, it's a lot harder to climb out of. So if you can just keep your foot on the gas, keep it going, I like our chances in this one. Power play has been doing better. I mean, it's better than nothing like we had for a little while there. Still 23rd in the league at 18% compared to Dallas, who's 11th in the league at 23%. Penalty
Sure, but
kill,
that's not going to change overnight.
right? Yeah, penalty kill has been doing somewhat better too, but there's still a lot of improvement for us. 24th in the league at 78%. But again, like you said, it's not going to fix itself overnight compared to Dallas's penalty kill, which is actually pretty good, 82%. That puts them at 7th in the league. Face-off percentage, that's something that we've struggled with most of the year. 47% puts us 27th in the league compared to Dallas's 54%, putting them in 4th. And for goals against, 235 for the Jets, first in the league compared to Dallas's 303, puts them at 14th. So I think that, like you said, the early start is gonna make a difference.
Yeah, I could see a 2-0 or even a 3-1 lead feeling pretty insurmountable against a team that just isn't putting the goals together right now.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, we've seen over the past couple of games that lead isn't always safe either.
And as the old adage goes, there's no safe lead in hockey. And I don't know why. I mean, you hear this one too, but I would almost rather, especially the way that our boys have been playing this year. I would almost rather have a 1-goal lead than a 2-goal lead, because there's just something. I think there's that false sense of security when you have a 2-goal lead, and we've seen those evaporate several times this year, maybe more often than you would like. So yeah, it's nice to get that early lead, but that's the thing, is you have to keep your foot on the gas.
Yep, and if they can do that, making Dallas stretch for scoring, that could open up for that to become a 4-1, 5-1 lead pretty quick too.
Yeah, it could be like that Boston game, that, and the Vancouver game, two of the best games that we played all year, in my opinion.
It's on the table.
Mm-hmm. I mean, those are just like really fun to watch too. So now looking ahead to the Carolina game. Okay, so we talked about our players to watch, but who you're going to want to watch out for on Carolina: Sebastian Aho, 3 goals in the last 5 games, also 4 points in the last 5 games, so about a point per game. Seth Jarvis, 3 assists in the last 5 games. So yeah, I mean they're still not scoring as much as us, which is kind of weird to say that at this point. But again, it's just, I don't know. I don't even know what I'm trying to say anymore. I'm like switching through all of my notes here. I normally write them down, but instead I have them on my phone in about 3 different apps. So
That'll get you.
multitasking is not my strong suit. Apparently, we've learned that one today. I have the standings in one app. I have all of the stats in my notes app. So the standings, I just use the NHL app if I'm being completely transparent. And then any of those key little stats I have in my notes app on my phone. So switching back and forth is always fun.
It'll catch it caught you.
Yeah. Well, now that I've made myself here, I'll at least go back and switch to my other app again for the standings. So going back to Dallas again, 31-point differential is what I was trying to get at earlier too, but they've now fallen to second in the league. We're tied with 79 points, but they also have played 61 games to our 57. And now to Carolina, their point differential, 29 points, and they have 76 points in their 59 games. So there, that puts them in second in the Metro. So it's still going to be a tough game, and I mean 11:30 in the morning. Sure, it's 12:30 local time, but that's an early game. You're gonna have to
It's
wake up, have coffee, and watch the game. I don't even think I could, in good conscience, have a beer to watch that one.
oh 11:30. I mean, that's like 3 or 4 hours after some Wisconsinites start drinking. So don't feel too bad about
Can't drink all day if you don't start in the morning, right?
that. Exactly.
That's on the front end of a back to back, which is a much more reasonable 6 o'clock game at Buffalo on Sunday. And now let me switch to my app here. There we go. Okay, we're good. Now, players to watch out for is the workhorse from Whitehorse. Cousins, four assists in the last 5 games. And as far as goals, Tage Thompson has 2 goals in the last 5 games, and the workhorse from Whitehorse, 5 points in the last 5 games. I love calling him the workhorse from Whitehorse because I'm going to Whitehorse later this year. My wife and I
Ooh,
are taking a Alaskan cruise. We're going in June, and that's one of the stops. Of course, the town is probably the size of my neighborhood here, but I don't know. It's kind of cool. Like the scenery, I'm excited for the most.
that's a place I haven't checked off yet. So that's
Never been to the Yukon.
no. I'm wondering how I'll ever check that box off, or if I'm just going to be content not to.
That's fair. So I don't think there's some provinces I'm probably never going to get to, but maybe one day. I said that there were some states that I was never going to get to, and I ended up living in one. So
There you go.
I said I was never going to visit North Dakota, and I lived in it. I guess I was
Yeah,
right. I never visited. I lived there.
there you go. Yeah, the Buffalo game worries me. I'll be honest. Just simply because you're coming off of the weird time the day before, third game in 4 days on the road against a team that's of lesser caliber than the first two you played. That's like classic trap game right there.
Yes, it is. And their last 10 games, they're 5-5. They're riding a 1 game losing streak. But yeah, like you
Well,
said,
they're not
classic
playing
trap
terrible
game.
hockey either.
No, they're not. Their record doesn't necessarily reflect how they've been playing because they're in a pretty top heavy division in the Atlantic. They've got 58 points in 59 games. At face value, that looks pretty bad. Not terrible, but it does look not good. We'll say that much. But then the jump between them and fifth place in the Atlantic with Tampa's 69 points, nice, in 61 games. And then, of course, the top of that division, you have Florida and Boston.
Those are pretty good teams.
Yeah. So, and Toronto, I mean, they're kind of a distant third even. Now, granted, they have 2 games in hand against Boston, but even at that, they have 74 points. So they're 8 points out of first. And Toronto's not, we don't look at them as a bad team. So, I mean, like I said, it's just a very top heavy conference, or excuse me, top heavy division.
Yeah. So I could see that one being a much more of a struggle than you would take that one and go, oh, it shouldn't be too hard. But given all the circumstances around it, I could see that one being a lot more of a struggle than you would necessarily guess just by looking at the matchup straight up.
Hmm. Yeah. What are your thoughts? How many points do you think we can take away from this stretch?
From the three, I would say four would be about where I would be good with.
I don't want to say three. I want to say four, but this is going to be I think that we've established that the slump was just that. I think it was just a slump, and they're coming out of it. They have another streak going, but this is going to be a test over the next 2 weeks or so. I feel like how if they're legit, I should say, like if they're going to make noise in the playoffs, because now this is the playoff teams aside from the wild card fight. The stage is starting to get set at this point. We're 60 games into the season, just about 22 left for most teams, give or take a game or two. The stage is really getting set aside from the wild card teams that honestly have a lot more to play for too, which is why some games against mid teams, will say, are going to be more of a struggle than they would be in, say, November.
Yep, playing for your playoff lives is always going to give you a little bit of inspiration.
Hmm. So yeah, it'll be there's likely going to have to be some adjustments made. Like I said, we kind of really addressed the weaknesses, but sacrificed some of the strengths. Now, if we can find that perfect balance, I think that this team could really make some noise in the playoffs.
Maybe we're there though, because again, we're not. There's not going to be perfection all across the
This
ice.
is true.
Scoring enough to take to cover a few defensive lapses, maybe a weaker first line defensively with Connor and Viardi around. Shifley seems to be the way that's been playing out. Second line seems to have settled in nicely with the Iafallo up and Perfetti down. Just seems to be working a little bit better than it had been. Third line, we know what we've got there. It's just gonna be okay, is this the balance, or is there still something that's way out of joint like we had before where they were playing really good 5-on-5, but any special team was a complete washout.
Hmm. And going back to the picking up Monahan, I watched a video today that just showed like all of his goals since coming to Winnipeg. And I don't like to be that guy, but I am so happy that, like, of all the targets that the Jets had, all the rumors that you heard, and I was like, I wanted to see Monahan get here. I'm so happy that it has played out the way that it did. And now the conversation, depending on how deep of a run this team makes it into the postseason, is he going to want to stay, or do you think that he's going to go to the highest bidder?
Money's money. It's going to be hard to convince somebody to stay if somebody's throwing a wad of cash. But all things being equal, if it's close, I could see him staying. It seems like he's found some chemistry with the players he's playing with right now. On the power play, the chemistry is clearly working well. Took a little bit longer to do the 5-on-5 thing, but it seems like they found something there as well. So, all things being equal, there's a fair shot.
Yeah, and I think that with him, like he's definitely finding his game like he had in Calgary, or at least the beginning of his tenure there. Things started to slide a little bit, and then wasn't the greatest in Montreal either. Didn't have the best tenure there, but if he found his niche, so to speak, maybe he would be a lot more willing to stay without even. I mean, he'd probably kick some tires. I would be very surprised if a guy like him wouldn't kick tires, especially after this kind of resurgence that he's had over the last few games. But he might not kick them as hard if he has that chemistry and say that, we'll just throw this out there. This is just for the sake of argument. Say that the Jets make it to a Western Conference final or even a Stanley Cup, may come short say that they just came short, didn't quite win the cup this year, but there's a chance next year. Sure, maybe he would ink a 1 or 2 year extension.
Yeah, being this close to free agency, I wouldn't be surprised if he dipped his toe, said, "Okay, is somebody going to throw me stupid money that I wouldn't have expected if I was still in Montreal and becoming a free agent?" I can't see why he wouldn't. Um, I mean, the Nito writers that go, "Oh, I love this place. I'm going to be here," and sign extensions right after trades or right after having been acquired. Doesn't happen too often,
Mm,
so I'm not too surprised to see to see him hit the market. But again, I mean, if the numbers are close, there's a chance. There's
mm-hmm.
a chance that he decides, hey, I've got like what we got going on around like where I'm at. I like you never do know though.
Right. I'm kind of glad to see. I thought of this when I was watching that video too. I was like, Monahan is what Kevin Hayes was supposed to be a few years ago when we traded for him. He is
Yeah,
everything that Hayes was supposed to be.
he fits. And
Hmm.
it took about 2 weeks for the team to find what worked best around him and for him to get acclimated with his teammates. But that's what we were talking about when the trade got made early on in the trade deadline season. Paying paying the first round pick feels a lot better when you have time to get him acclimated, time to get him rolling. Sure beats having him show up in a week is what that's about what we got left, and then taking that 2 weeks and then you're almost at the end of the season already.
Yeah. Yeah. At that point, you're about halfway through March. So you got a
Right.
month left in the season at best.
Right. It made the price feel a lot more palatable, and it's paying off.
Oh, for sure. It's certainly paid dividends. Now, speaking of paying, speaking of money, one of the last issues that want to address for today's episode is the elephant in the room, the Gary Bettman situation, saying that everything is hunky dory and that fans have no reason to worry about the team relocating. And we were talking about this before the show, and I was like, it's better to hear it straight from the horse's mouth, like hearing it from Bettman himself, as opposed to hearing it from True North Sports Entertainment, saying that everything's fine. We've seen that movie before. Team or owners have said that, and teams have relocated the next year. So it's it's nice to hear it from Bettman, but wanted to gather your thoughts on it.
I think just based off of what I'm seeing, I mean, obviously we don't have boots on the ground, but I do know season ticket holders, and I've been hearing complaints for years about how uh, the franchise seems to be operating on that level. And I think it's just what's happening is that the attendance number is, or the season ticket holder number, to be fair, because the attendance number is going up because the team's winning, and people want to go see that. Winning cures a lot of things, and it might help cure this situation too. I think True North is figuring out, okay, it's not like 2011 where there's a huge amount of unmet demand in this city where people are just going to sign on the dotted line. We put up a marquee that says game 7:30 and people will show up. They're just now realizing that that time frame is over and they just need to work a little bit harder to gain fans' attention again, to get them back in the building. It, and from all the statements they're making, it seems like they're understanding that they need to do a little bit better to to attract a little bit more corporate attention, and B to just make sure that fans remember them and to really connect for the first time uh, on a deeper level. Because what it was 2019 where there was the first game that wasn't a sellout. It was like 8 years of sellouts without having to put a whole lot of effort into it, and then
Hmm.
COVID hits, the economy, and the really honestly the fact that the team was like just kind of sitting there for a couple of years in the same just I don't want to use the word mediocre, but that's the one's coming up. It's like the team
It's
was
the perfect definition
okay.
for it.
Yeah. The team was okay, but it wasn't really it really wasn't going, "Hey, this is really good. Come see this."
Right.
So I think all of that happening in one time helped those numbers drop to the point where, okay, now we have to pay attention. And
Mhm.
I think they're getting that message. So come back to me in a year and we'll see how things are going. But I think, okay, we found that there's things we can improve, and I think they're gonna start working on that and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, it's something that you wanna see because if sure, the attendance numbers are going up, but that, the gate revenue is nice to have when the team is winning. But if your season ticket sales are going down, you can't always count on those walk-ins, so to speak. And that's something that I think that they're going to take to heart, and they have to do something to garner that interest again, especially, not to get political, but the economy is not necessarily the greatest, in both the US and Canada. So families are going to want to pinch pennies as best as they can. And if they don't have something to attract that clientele that they're looking for, they're not going to come just because the fact that they're trying to save money. They'll probably say something like, well, we can go to a restaurant, we can go to a bar and catch the game and have a similar atmosphere.
Yeah, and I think that just the early on lack of personal attention is coming back to bite them a bit. And I think they know that. Let's see how they respond.
Hmm. And we'll see. There's been some complaints about price on things such as tickets, such as concessions, and sure, you can attribute some of that to inflation. But the end of the day, like I said, they need to do something to show. I don't want to say to show that they care, but you get where I'm going with this.
Mm, right.
So they won't
I just
prove that they care. We'll say that we'll prove that they care.
right. Yeah. And I think it just when you mention even the general idea of the franchise not doing well or gonna be leaving, there's trauma, and that's gonna provoke a response. And I think that's really what is happening here is there was a mention of things aren't going as well as we want to, and that just set off a firestorm because it has happened before.
Hmm.
So it just sitting back in my chair right here. I mean, we're what 8 9 hours away driving, so we're not in the epicenter of this. But at the same time, I know people that have been there for both, for the end of one, the beginning of the other. I can see why this triggered this response, but I think it's going to start slowly fading away. We're going to get back to worrying about line combinations and playoff matchups. And I think by next year, things will have started trending the opposite way. So here's hoping
Mm,
that my take on that is the right take.
right. Yeah, I'm just hoping that like they're not dangling the carrot, so to speak, like, oh, our team's in trouble, come watch us. And then that's their tactic of getting fans in the stands again. I hope that that's not it. I don't think it is, but I'm certainly hoping that that's not it. Because yeah, you can ride that for only so long, but then again, if that's all that you have to try to attract more fans, that's not a sustainable business model.
No, and you saw just the first batch of season tickets went away in what, minutes?
Hmm.
So there's definitely demand for the product as long as the fans are treated well.
Yes, agreed. Now we have just a little bit of CFL news to cover, and then we have some big announcement regarding next week. And I'm not going to say next week's show, but let's talk about what's going on in Toronto.
Yeah, we should just briefly mention that there were allegations and a lawsuit now out about activities by Chad Kelly, um, quarterback over there, who had a fantastic season, but it seems like he was having some trouble. League is investigating the issue at this point, um, but there is a lawsuit out there for him basically harassing female staff to the point where she ended up being let go because she was rejecting his advances. That's the easiest way to put it.
Mhm.
Um, League put out a statement today that they're doing an independent investigation to see what happened. Um, there's also some allegations that people further up in the organization weren't responding to her when she brought it up in the first place, which honestly troubles me just as much as the first thing. So we'll have to see how this all plays out. It's probably going to be a longer process than any of us would want it to be, but that's just the way things tend to go in these situations. But um, yeah, really no easy way to say it, any of this. So
Right. Yeah. And I mean, according to their press release, too, they just want to mention, too, that they're not going to be able to provide further comments until the investigation's been completed. And there's no time frame on that either. But as you had mentioned, some pretty harsh accusations that should never be taken lightly. And it's, it's just tragic all around. And we don't want to obviously spread any rumors, but it is something that is worth mentioning.
yeah, yeah. Not to mention it would be worse than just mentioning it happened in our eyes.
Hmm. Absolutely, yeah, that would just be a disservice. Um, but to help land the show on a bit of a happier note, we obviously went really heavy there, but we will not be having a Winnipeg Terminal show next week for a particular reason, and that reason is next Thursday. So, obviously, day after we would be doing the show, my wife, who, as most viewers know at this point, she is pregnant and she is going to be induced for labor. So the Winnipeg Terminal family will be growing by one, and I wanted to spend that night before she's induced for labor, just spend time with the wife, and I guess it would be our last night at home, just the two of us, because even if she doesn't have the baby on Thursday, we're still going to be in the hospital until labor is actually happening. So yeah, we're really excited, and we're having a daughter, and her name's Lauren. So we'll be meeting her soon.
Hmm. And your life will be the better for it.
Oh man, I can't wait. It was funny. We had an appointment with our midwife yesterday, and like she's getting measured. We're listening to the baby on the Doppler, and anyways, so when my wife goes to lay down on that examining table or whatever, picks up her shirt and you can see like the pregnant belly. You were able to see the outline of the baby's butt, and it was funny because the midwife, she just like points and kind of like rubs, and she's like, "Oh, look, her little butt." And I thought that was the funniest thing ever. But it is kind of cute to see that. So yeah, we're so excited and can't wait.
Good, good. You guys are it's gonna be emotionally draining. You're gonna
Hmm.
feel more tired than you've ever felt in your life and happier than you've ever felt in your life.
Yeah, and and I think that you can probably attest to this too from everyone that I've heard. They say, yeah, you are very tired, especially those first 3 months. But you would do it for 3 years if it meant having that same feeling back.
Mhm.
So I can't wait. And if I had any sort of beverage, even if it was a non-alcoholic one, I'd raise a glass to it. But I have nothing today because I ran out of my non-alcoholic beer.
Yep, and you've only got 2 days left, so no
This
sense in
Friday,
reloading.
yep, this Friday I can actually have beer again, like actual beer. And then I'll be able to crack one of those. You know what? Next week there'll be the first one that I can crack an actual beer, and I won't be here.
There you go.
All
Well, it'll
right.
happen sooner rather than later.
I was going to say give it 2 weeks, and I'll be able to crack a beer, and you might hear a baby crying in the background, but most likely that's going to be upstairs. I'm in my basement for the podcast, but
Well, more than welcome, though. That's a good sign.
yeah. All right. Well, this is we're signing off. We're the Winnipeg terminal, clear for landing for the dub. Go Jets, go!